peachy. Okay, well, first of all, thank you for being with me again this morning. And I appreciate for anybody who intended to drive in, although I don't think any of you are in the Halifax area. Are you? Nobody's in Halifax. So this worked perfectly. Bill, are you in Halifax?
Yeah, we're in
Okay.
Halifax. Yeah.
I've got one chicken here that's in Halifax. So
Yeah.
this just make honestly for my scheduling, I really, really appreciate being able to do this for on Zoom today with you. So today we're kind of going to the next stage of what we had been working on last time. Oh my God, that was only Monday. Sorry. I don't know about you, but I don't know how it's Wednesday. And we were talking about relationships and building those seller and buyer trust elements and what our fiduciary duties were and the difference between fiduciary and functionary. So today we're going to talk about they've hired you. Now we're going to write offers and we're going to negotiate offers on the other side. That's the fun part, isn't it? So I'm going to share my screen. Da, da, da. That's the theory. Okay, so first of all, can you guys see this or do I need to put it into giant presenter mode?
No, it's good.
Better if it's, you're okay? Doesn't seem to want to let me make it any bigger. Okay, because it's either that or go into gigantic presenter mode and then it like flips my screen around. It does something weird that I don't love. So while I'm on Zoom. So we'll try this. And if something comes up that you can't see, just let me know and I will flip it so that it gets bigger for everybody. How's that? So I didn't pull this one up last time, and I know it's in your book, and I know it's something that you probably have seen, but I don't know that I've ever spoken to you guys about it. I know when you did your KW orientation, this conversation would have come up. But before we get into offers, I actually think this section is actually worth taking a second just to chat about. This is on the wall in every KW office in the world, I believe. There used to be my predecessor, Val, who was just an incredible woman. When I first started, she had told me about the Y4C2Ts. And she said, oh, well, there's a little song and dance we do at the meetings to show it. And I went, oh, and she said, yeah, it's like a little teapot song. And I went, no, that's not happening. I will explain the Y4C2Ts, but I'm I'm a little teapot while I explain it. Anyway, I guess it rhymes. So the reason that this is so important in what we're about to do is just to make sure we carry the right mindset with us when we're negotiating. We talked a lot at last time about the impact you have on industry members, how that matters, taking the higher road, et cetera, and how that protects your reputation in order to create long-term business, not just with your own clients, but that other agents want to deal with you, et cetera, et cetera. So when we connect these two things, we talked about walking away from deals when that was the fiduciary thing to do, that it's just not the right thing for your buyer or seller. You need to tell them to shut it down, and how you're working with the other agent, et cetera. This is really important in the bigger scope of your business. And we talked about it on Monday. I don't think it gets enough attention. But the reason I mentioned this again before we start today is when we're thinking about how we're going to be negotiating and not just the legal side of it, but keeping this in mind that it should be a win-win or no deal. We shouldn't be taking advantage. We shouldn't be going down that road. I'll give you an example when we talk about that. And I think Bill, you may be the only one, maybe Stacy. Stacy, how long have you been licensed now?
I've been licensed about a year and a half, almost 2 years.
Okay. Stacy?
I've been just over 3 years.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like it might be 3, but I also don't know what date is. We've discussed that. So that means Bill and Stacy, you would have had your toe, and Stacy maybe a bit more in the whole COVID world of negotiation. And the reason I mentioned this, like win-win or no deal, and doing the right thing and integrity, et cetera, that are in our Y4C2Ts, either you were in this or for Suzette and Jane, you've heard some of the horror stories that have happened. And I'm very proud of the fact that I did not have consumer complaints about any of our KW agents, that they felt that they had been railroaded or shoved into deals, or buyers freaking out that, our agents had, given them this most ridiculous guidance ever. There was a lot happening in that time. And I think it's a really big lesson for us in going forward. I know personally, we were dealing with people on the other side in certain cases, especially as the buyer, where you really felt like it didn't matter whether it was right or wrong, what they were doing. It was about the money only. And it didn't matter if someone else got hurt. I'm going to give you an example. When we were listing properties during the foolishness, and we joked about this the other day, that, you could basically, stick a sign on a piece of, what, and someone would, throw a bag of money at it. And what was happening in that time was, even if massive inspection issues were coming up, like big time, like complete septic failures, mold, like you name it, there were sellers who were basically being told, you know what, doesn't matter, let these people go, you get your extra 150,000, 200,000, or whatever the heck it is, and just carry on, kick them out, get the next person who's going to take it, or whatever. And I know that that wasn't the mindset that you guys were working with. And I know, and another example would be connected to that, is when we were listing properties and we would say to a seller, okay, essentially someone is going to throw you a ludicrous amount of money at your house. You and I both agree, this makes no sense. They go, yes, absolutely. This is, you're only making more money, by the way, in these situations if you move to somewhere in a different market. Otherwise, you just take that buyer's money and throw it at the next house. Your net doesn't change. Everybody follows me on that one? So anyway, so when we were listing properties in that time, we were saying to our sellers, okay, if someone comes to you and has essentially said, okay, we've now discovered, I don't know, mold, the septic's completely failed, it's our opinion that they paid good value with the expectation that this was working, because we didn't know it wasn't working before. And it's our opinion that it would be the right thing to do, depending, of course, how much you give, depending on the percentage of the offer, but that we shouldn't be those people, that that's not fair. And I have to tell you, most sellers, when you actually put it to them that way, were like, absolutely not an issue, right? We had a situation where there was lead in the lead water lines in the city. These people had a young family, blah, blah, blah. You don't have to pull the lead lines out. By the way, there's a water treatment system you can put in, so you don't have to dig up your whole front yard, but moving on. And so, downtown Halifax, pretty common that there's still the lead lines. And we were in a multiple offer situation as buyers. And of course, you're like, well, I'll ask, but I don't know, et cetera, et cetera. And some of this was also before the 408. So you could get kicked out for asking for a light bulb. And I can remember us going to the sellers and saying, this is what we've discovered. And, we'd like to have a conversation about it. Well, it turns out that these particular sellers were looking after the family who were now in a senior's residence. And both of the parents had suffered from Parkinson's. And these sellers went, oh my goodness, what if this lead line was a contributing factor to this whole thing? We cannot let another family do this. And they paid to put the water system in. So let's not assume that when we're negotiating that everyone else isn't also going to do the right thing. But you doing the right thing, that's what I want to make sure that we always keep in mind when we're talking about negotiation and we're talking about offers, especially when the market's tough. It's harder sometimes when the market is more balanced or tougher to really pull yourself out of what you also need, and or the desperation that you may sense in your clients based on whatever they have to sell or they have to buy or whatever, and making sure that grown-ups, they're going to make their own decisions. I'm not telling you that you're in charge of them, but I am telling you that when we follow the Y4C2Ts and we function at that higher level of, let's think of the other side. How would you feel if that happened? What is the right thing to do, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes that means saying, I don't think you should buy this house. Or I don't think you should sell in this particular deal is not going, it's not going right. Versus just sort of plowing it through. You've heard all of those stories, not just during COVID, but even now. And so I'm just resetting us a little bit to make sure that we're thinking about it at that higher level of professionalism that I know you guys all have when we get into the minutia of how we deal with that. Is that work for everybody? Smiling and nodding. Love it. Okay, perfect. So where we are now, bear with me here, is that we're at the buyer making an offer stage is where we're going to be starting, right? So then when we move from there, let's talk about US buyers agents. Let's talk about some of the things. Now there's other things to this, and I'm going to direct you to 2 handouts that we have also prepared internally to help you how to prep a listing and how to prep an offer. So I mean, honestly, some of these things seem kind of ridiculous. Ensure the property is still available. Although at the same time, there are definitely situations where you showed a property 2 or 3 days ago. It hasn't changed its status online. You need to be in strong communication with that other agent if you have a consumer that is interested in that property, because nothing is going to be more upsetting is if you didn't have that communication and now you have to go back to your buyer and say, oh, so sorry, I didn't actually follow up and it's under offer. Now, I'm not saying that you can make the other agent keep you informed. I am very aware of that element, but all we can do is control what our efforts are on it. So again, please making sure that even before you show property, sometimes you'll see something that's been on for a few days or a month, or and you're not sure, you know, you make the appointment or you're asking questions just before you get everybody all excited about it. So looking at that, you know, again, building a rapport with a listing agent. So, oops, I don't mean to annotate. That is not what I intended to do. I'm not drawing on the screen. So we chatted a little bit about this on Monday, and this is also about, you know, we were joking about, you know, you're showing a property and you see a person's name at the bottom, and although in violation of the MLS rules fully aware, you cannot not show that property or boycott that human, but that doesn't mean that you're super excited about doing that deal with that person. And it might be that if there's another house that's darn near identical that your clients love as much, you might tell them about your experience that you've had and, you know, et cetera, and that maybe this would be a better person to do business with. Just like on the flip side, when you're the listing agent or when you're in a multiple offer buyer situation, and if your offer is very, very close to another one and the other person or you have created a bad reputation in working with your peers or crashing deals or whatever it is you're doing, someone else might win. We want you to be the one that wins. So building rapport. So can we just stop on that for 1 second? Can you tell me some examples of how you can build rapport in today's way of communication as agents?
Give
Anybody
good
just leap in.
feedback.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to ask you some questions on that. So can you tell me what you consider or what you would describe as good feedback?
So I like try to do like, you can do like general ones. It depends what your clients, you know, give you back. Like, you know, everyone's different. But if you have something really specific about the house, you know, that you're like, you know what, well, for instance, we just went to one and the kitchen layout was awful. And it's been sitting for 3 months. And so I'm like, it's probably because the rest of the house is totally adorable. Like there's really nothing about the rest of the house that's not making it sound. It's got nice floors, it's everything. But the kitchen layout is awful. Like it's just awful. So
Like awkward.
so awkward. And I think that awkward is what I used, I think. So I was nice about it, but I was like, it's great except for the layout of the kitchen. And you know, it's unfortunate, but it would probably have to be redone. It's not super new anyway. So that was some feedback I gave, but try to be nice about it because like I know for me, when I get feedback, I could just kind of copy and paste sometimes because I want it to not necessarily be my words given to my client. So I try to be nice about it, but giving them constructive criticism type of thing.
So there's
something they can
two
maybe
elements,
use.
yeah. So let's think about, again, if we think about how we want to feel when we've got a listing and you've got crickets or there's nothing more infuriating in my entire world. Well, I would lie, there's probably something else, but at this particular moment, as we discuss feedback, when you get not interested, what the hell is that? So that's not helpful. So I want us to think about what do we want to hear. And so there's one thing I want to add to what you had mentioned, Stacey, which was what your client gives you. To me, there's 2 elements to your feedback. there's what was the client's perception of, X or Y. Then sometimes it's you saying, if it was me, blah, 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 or I just need to let you know that my clients may not have told me to tell you this, or I don't know, maybe there's a smell, or it's super cluttery. And, and a lot of times what happens is when you have these conversations, like the clients may not have said it's cluttery, but they feel like, oh, it feels tight, or I don't like the layout. And you say, okay, I needed a map to move through. It was like every space was jammed, whatever. This, neon orange wall was distracting. Like, I'm just giving you my honest feedback. It's such a cute house, but I think these things, from my perspective, are interfering. I will tell you that when you have that conversation, I'm going to want you to remember the word I just used, conversation, with the other agent, they're going to say, thank you. I have been telling my seller this for 2 months, and the more I can get the actual comments back, the better chance I have of fixing it for them. You're not usually telling them something they don't know, or you are, oh my God, it smells like a litter box. They may not have been in the house for a month and don't know that. So that is helping the other seller. It's not just helping your other industry member, you're helping another consumer to be a great seller, which means another buyer has an opportunity. Okay. I do want you to be very, very careful in our technological age right now with Showing Time. Showing Time is the most amazing tool that has been added, other than e-signatures, in my opinion, in my 20 years of business. However, there is an ability for agents to auto forward feedback through Showing Time to their agents with no scrub. I don't know if you knew that. It's a setting. When you set up your listings, you can set it that they just auto get everything you say. The reason I mention this is, please assume if you are typing something into Showing Time, that you write it in a way that you assume the seller is going to read it. Think about this again when we talk about our reputation and doing deals, etc. You're the person who writes your unfiltered, snarky thoughts about whatever the property was. That goes directly to the seller. Then your client decides to write an offer. Not great. They'll remember, because they're going to ask which agent said that, guaranteed. We talked in the last class about difficult conversations. This is an example of a difficult conversation. What I mean is, unless you have really positive, sunny feedback to give, or that's very generic, that's not going to be difficult or controversial, go ahead, put it in Showing Time. If you need to share some other thoughts, there was a smell, the thing cluttery, orange wall, whatever, the deer heads, whatever it is, right? Pick up the phone, call the other agent and say, I have some feedback on your property. It's not the one for my clients, but I'd love to discuss with you why, in case it could be of service or help to both you and your seller. They will call you back. You have a conversation and you say, look, I'm not, like, I understand, whatever, however you want it, depending on the person, et cetera, et cetera. I just need you to know this was something that was raised or was concerning, or did you know there was a pile of water, or whatever it is. When you do it by phone, not by email, not by text message, you are communicating, you are building rapport. The next time you show one of their properties, or when they show your properties, they're going to say, this person is a professional. They're great at working with. We should definitely continue to have the conversation. You're also going to build credibility for yourself in future negotiations, because even if it's not this deal, but you're doing something with this person later, you're going to have built credibility. You're going to have established yourself higher as a professional, which means, in general, when you say something the next time that's feedback, they'll say to their client, this person knows what they're doing, they're always honest, blah, 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 et cetera, which means what you will have said will have more weight. So think about that in a negotiation perspective. I know I'm like all over the place. Stacey, bear with me because I'm terrible at following the slides, but I do get to everything eventually. if you've built that credibility with that other agent, now let's say you're in a deal with them and you need to have a difficult conversation, or you're suggesting something that needs to happen in an amendment and or in the structure of negotiation. You're going to have way more credibility in those conversations, and it starts as simply as when you start showing the property. I do believe that it is a colossal mistake that agents make, that they look at the other agent as the adversary. They are the gatekeeper to the product you and your client want. You are the gatekeeper to the buyer they want. We have a willing buyer and a willing seller. We're on the team, guys, not the opposite.
I have to
Because
tell you,
without them,
regarding like being like on a team, I have had probably 2 realtors that I have worked with a couple times. And I know the one blew me away when he actually said to me, he was like, we want to get this house sold. And he basically was like, I know you guys want it. We want to sell it. Let's make this work. And the wording he used and everything was like that him and I were working together. And I've had that with one other realtor. I've had some great, realtor experiences. Obviously, I've had a few deals here and there. But there was 2 times, 2 different realtors that, and one of them doesn't have a great reputation with people, but working with her, I was like, oh my gosh, she understands that we need to be a team. So
Yeah.
and it makes a huge difference when I know the other realtor is willing to work with me. And I know they're working for the seller or their buyer or whichever.
Right.
But
Right.
we're still trying to like work together, and it's not us, instead of like some other realtors who are like, no,
this.
I'm doing, you know what I mean? And I'm like, that's
Yeah.
not helping
How
anybody.
dare you, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. And again, like, I'm not the one saying I'm not paying that price, or I'm just speaking for them. Let's talk like humans and try to work together. Anyway, there's a huge difference in your mentality of how you go into
It does.
that.
And again, it starts as simply as when you show the property. I'll give you an example. I'm sure you've had it happen where you've had a listing, or if you haven't had a listing yet, this will happen to you, where someone will book a showing and they won't go in. They may have pulled up, but they didn't go in, or they didn't show up at all. So first of all, if any of you do that, I'm coming after you. Not okay. Those sellers got ready. They're expecting someone to come in their home. Never mind whether you like it, don't like it. Either you cancel in advance or you get your arse in your car and you go and see that house, even if your clients don't want to see it. If you pull up to a house and your clients go, oh, no, 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 this does not look like what I thought. It has definitely happened to me. And I've said to my clients, no worries. I actually agree with you. This is not your house. However, if you can just wait here for a minute, I'm going to go in the house. I owe the respect to those sellers and that agent to go through the house and at the very least give them feedback. And who knows, maybe it's something that's suitable to another one of my clients. You go through the darn house and you're not going to be in there for as long, but it doesn't matter. Then you can get feedback and you can say, we pulled up, tell the truth. They know how long, if you're in Halifax, they know how long your lockbox was open. If they're somewhere else, I'm going to have a door cam. They know how long you were there, right? They know what's happening. And to say it wasn't for my clients, but I, out of respect for your clients, made sure that I went in and looked at it. A, it could be something that's great for another one of my clients. And B, I wanted to make sure that I gave them proper feedback. You will win 1 million negotiation points later. Negotiation starts at the beginning. And this is the message that I want you to have. You can be the most skilled negotiator in the world, but if you have shot your own foot off before you get to the table, it's going to be a really unpleasant negotiation. Yeah, again, I'm not going to tell you that everybody you're going to negotiate with, it's going to be a pleasure to work with. I'm not going to tell you that. However, all you can control is you and what you've done. And there are definitely circumstances where I've, in my 20 years, had some very interesting personalities on the other side. Is that politically correct? Did you like that? Was that good? Does that work? And where I've been able to say, okay, so-and-so, Jane, to be able to say, okay, with all due respect, this is what we did. This is the path we did. This is this, this is this. Can you please explain to me where this hostility is coming from? And in most cases, they'll go, okay, yeah, you're right. It's this or that or something else. That's a big part of this. The calmer you are, the calmer they are. Don't rise to the bait, etc. Does that make sense? But I want you to think when we're talking about negotiation, and we're going to get into more of the meat of it, I want you to remember that that starts
Yesterday.
from showing other properties. It shows from working in other deals with these people, interacting them with another, that it carries forward. And I'm sorry, if you do not believe me, you are going to have a very tough go, especially when you're in smaller communities. But I have to tell you, Halifax is pretty darn small because it's still no different than anywhere else. 20% of the agents are doing 80% of the business. You sell with the same people again and again and again in a lot of cases. And I'm sure obviously in smaller communities that happens as well. So we have to be thinking bigger, right? So, okay. I'm going to actually ask if we can just pause for one moment, and I'm just going to pause the recording and pause us for a second. I just need a couple minutes. Is that okay with everyone? Okay, bear with me. I'm gonna. Okay, frozen in time, back to where we were. So anyway, the Y4C2Ts, negotiation, etc. How we're doing all of these things are very, very important in the next stages of your business, in the sense of actually trying to get the deal done. So I realize that I'm pulling a little bit more off script onto that, but I just think it's really important that we keep in mind. And for you to also, when you're talking to other agents who might be struggling, or with other people, or how to deal with it, or they're getting bumped, just to also share that mindset with your co-KW agents or other people you're talking to. Okay, so that is my calendar. Nobody have a heart attack. So inquiring on other offers. I think you guys generally do that overall. Asking questions about their motivation and needs. This one is a little more controversial, but typically motivations isn't what we would be recommending you to be discussing, but what are the seller's needs? I.e., is there a preferred closing date? Is the thing, I don't know, that you saw, is something negotiable? Is, what do they need in order to help you structure a strong offer? Because as we all need to constantly remember and remind our sellers and buyers, is that there is more to an offer than price. The price is important, but there's lots of other factors that, depending on the circumstances and the need of either the buyer or the seller, can make the deal more appealing to everybody. Therefore, going back to the concept of communication, which apparently we're going to beat you over the head with over the next on a regular basis, but it is really important in that. So I don't know that motivations, most agents, if they're smart, won't tell you, but that's okay. How do they want to receive the offer, and or when? Pardon me. Again, I don't know. So Bill, you'd be seeing it, what Halifax is doing. I don't know specifically for Suzette, Jane, and Stacy what you're seeing, but we are generally seeing the end of the holding offers, generally. Is that fair? Is that the same for you? Okay. So what you're going to start to see more is leave the offer open for 24 hours, leave the offer open for 48 hours, because that's a tiny way of accomplishing a potential bidding war, or at least generating more interest in that time frame. So again, how do they want to receive the offers? I mean, I don't know. 99% of people are sending their offers by e-signature program, but I don't know, maybe you have someone who wants you to fax it. I don't have any idea. I don't have a fax machine, but anyway, moving on. It doesn't, what is the timeline? What are the different things, et cetera, in terms of communicating those offers? Something that I do need to remind you, and this is why the brokers are the ones that teach these particular sections. But one of the things I do also need to remind you, particularly as a buyer's agent, you need to take the lawful instruction of your buyer to leave the offer open for however long the buyer instructs you to, despite what may be written on the showing instructions. It will irritate the other side. Fine, but it's not, an egregious thing. If you are doing that and not, I'm going to call it respecting the timeline given by the seller, my personal advice is that you call that agent to say, I have an offer coming for you. I do need you to know that my buyer has instructed me not to leave it open, say for the full 48 hours, based on their timeline and their needs. This is kind of where we're at. And then they're going to decide how they respond to that versus you just ignore them and send it in looking like you don't care. Do you see the difference? You're still sending in the same offer with a different timeline that they wanted, but now they don't think that you are trying to be a bully or that you're trying to be disrespectful. For your buyers, it's incredibly important that they know that it doesn't matter what time you put on the offer. You cannot force a seller to move faster than they want to. Now, the seller has their own risks associated with that, but I want to flip this around because, again, this connects to negotiation and how you're prepping all of the parties because all of these little pieces line up to be negotiation. If you are the seller, personally, I want you to imagine you're the seller. And I come along with my offer and I say, I want you to answer me in 4 hours. It's 7 o'clock at night. Now, I can tell you we've done this, but that was in a different market. And sometimes they're like, absolutely no problem. But in other cases, they will say, I'm sorry, my clients are at hockey with their kids and this is not, one's at work and we instructed 24 hours for a reason. Okay, well, that's fine, but I still have to send it in to you. Okay, fine. You still have to let your people know, et cetera, et cetera. But your buyers are now like, well, how come they did? I gave this to them. This is the seller's house. It's their asset. You, as a buyer's agent, are not in a position to force this seller to make an egregious decision in an amount of time that is not suitable to them. Make sense to everybody? So we need to set the expectations with our buyers because, again, this is a part of how you then domino into other elements of negotiation. I'm not suggesting that you don't follow the lawful instruction of your buyer. That's not what I'm saying. But when you do it, you need to make sure you build the boundaries around what could happen. And everybody here is clear on the fact that you can counter at any time. Is everybody familiar with that? Yes? Jane? Yes? Suzette? No? Okay. So I'm going to remind you of this because this is super important, again, in how you negotiate, both for a buyer and for a seller. So if you're a buyer and you put, let's say they said leave offer open for 48 hours. You go, no, I can't wait that long. We're on a house hunting trip, whatever, blah, 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 whatever. Can't wait. We put it in for 24 hours. The other agent says to you, look, I don't know if I'll try, blah, 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 whatever, or they come back and say, yeah, we've got your offer booked. We are going to be countering. I will let's say your offer is open until 2 o'clock today. They say, I will have a counter to you by this evening when both parties get home from work and they have a chance to chat further, blah, blah, blah. You're going, what? No. The wording on your APS says that the seller has until X time to accept. ACCEPT, accept. They can counter or reject anytime they want. They can counter you 4 days later. There is no time frame to counter. And you do not write in the counter that the time for acceptance is now X. That doesn't make any sense. Don't do that. Don't do that. Because you're not accepting it. You're doing a counter, which is a new offer. Make sense? So the reason I mention this is that when you set timelines with your buyers, based on what offer you write, you want to set the expectation that the seller is supposed to, if they're going to accept our offer, this is the timeline. But they can counter us at a later timeline. The agent will let me know what that is. Can you imagine how that changes your negotiation with your buyer when they understand that they're not being ignored? This is a big decision. Maybe they need to call their bank. Maybe you've asked for something like, I don't know, pay out the hot water heater, and it's Saturday night at 8. And your clients are like, well, I don't know what that's going to cost me. Is it $1,000? Is it $5,000? I can't agree to this offer until I get that answer. So you can either leave your offer open longer by amending it or just hang on and I will counter it. But please know the risk is that your offer is now technically dead and they don't actually have to acknowledge you at all. But it is important to understand that we set those expectations with our buyers. Because if we don't, it's 201. They now are pissed at the sellers for no reason, except that you didn't prepare them for how timelines work. So now their backs are up, for lack of a better analogy. They're suspicious. They think they're playing hardball, that blah, blah, blah. They don't respect their offer, et cetera, which is likely not at all what's happening. But it's like getting a text message and you think you understand the tone that went with that text message. And how many times are you wrong? So this is the same thing. This is you setting the expectations on how negotiation is going to go. We talked about setting expectations in Monday's class. That was expectations about the market and pricing and timing and et cetera, and what your services are, et cetera. Well, now we're setting the expectations on how negotiations work in the province of Nova Scotia, how successful negotiations work. Let me clarify that statement. For your sellers, it's also important to be able to say, it's okay, don't panic. Nobody can force you out of your house. If we need more time, we can tell them you do need to be prepared. They might go on to something else. And depending on your seller's circumstances, they'll say, okay, that's fine. I can't do this right. I can't answer this yet. But this comes back to what we just chatted about before. This is about communication, going back to the other agent as well and making sure that they have the information to communicate back to their party so that everybody is still moving along as a willing buyer and willing seller. Do you see the difference that this can make right at the beginning? When you've talked to the other agent and they've said, under absolutely no circumstances will they give you their cat. Don't laugh. I've seen offers with cats. Pretty funny, actually. And you put the cat in. Well, they just literally told you that under no circumstances. Well, I'm not saying you don't have a conversation to say, if everything else is equal and we all come to terms, is this something they would consider? But if they just told you basically to go jump in the lake for the thing you're asking for, putting it right in your offer 5 minutes later isn't going to be really popular. Unless you're offering a gigantic bag of money, but you're still not getting my cat. But anyway, I swear to God, I've seen one with cat. It actually was a blessing in this particular case because the people were relocating and they were not sure they were going to be able to bring the cat or have the home for the cat. And these other people love the cat. You know, there are happy endings with cats in the sale of real estate. It's technically a chattel, just FYI. Cats have no rights. Anyway, so again, my point being how we start communicating and what are those expectations and how are you talking to this other agent from this moment and how you set the expectations with your sellers or buyers on what's going to happen is going to change the success of the negotiation because you don't have everybody all wound up. You're also going to be the person they say, oh my God, I love doing business with Stacey. She's so wonderful, great communication. Even if it's not the news I want, I know, blah, blah, that's what you want. You're not always going to win. You're not always going to make everybody happy, but you don't need to be unpleasant about it. And you don't need to drag the emotions of your buyers and sellers through that rodeo. Okay. So here I go, in theory, back on track. So,
and I just want to make sure I understand that whole concept. So when you, anytime that you're submitting an offer and there's a time frame on it, does that apply to with amendments? Like everything is kind of that you ask for the time, but you flex?
That is an excellent question. Well, yes, I guess my answer is going to be yes and no. So let me I'll do counter offers first and then I'll do the other. Is that okay?
Yeah.
And thank you, Suzette, for asking a question. Please, at any point, if I'm blah, 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 thinking you know something and or you thought you know something and now you have another question, please jump in. This is exactly why we're here. So with a counter offer, you have right under the part where you put agency, actually clause 13 in case anybody cares. It's the section where you put this offer is open for acceptance until blank time on blank date. Okay. Then clause 14 is, this is the most fabulous thing I've ever seen. Please buy my house. You can go jump in the harbor or the lake or the river or the ocean, or depending on where y'all live, and or we're close. but we need to tweak a little bit. And here's a counteroffer. Those are your three choices, right? But the wording of 13 is that I have until X time to accept. So it's about setting your expectations with your buyers in particular when you submit an offer, that this is the time that we are putting it open till. I have spoken to the other agent and explained our timing. However, it is possible that the sellers may counter and that counter may not arrive at this deadline. That's fine. They have the right to do that. You do not need to initial change, put in a counter that the time for acceptance is open, because you're not accepting, you're countering. You can't be single and married at the same time. You can't be accepting and countering at the same time. They're opposite things. Okay? So you can counter at any time. I will give you another example. A million years ago, don't know when, I'm going to say 8 or 9 years ago, but again, why not? Could have been 5 minutes ago. We had received an offer as listing agents, and there was a whole bunch of complications that came up as a result of the offer. Something to do with ownership or title. I don't even remember the minutia of it. It doesn't matter. Basically, what ended up happening is we ended up getting that stuff sorted and countering 5 days later. So on the counter, it says on the agreement of purchase and sale, dated X. The date was 5 days ago. Fine. Totally fine. So amendments have an open for acceptance time. I'm going to have just one tiny little rant on counteroffers and amendments since I have you. The little things I'm going to mention. So the first thing is, so I'm just going to answer your question first, Suzette, and then I'll give my little two. Please, please don't do these things to me. So with amendments, there is a time for acceptance. Now, if it is not accepted and or the time goes by, the amendment's dead. It's like it never happened. Okay. That doesn't mean the deal's dead, it means the amendment's dead. There's a difference. So if I'm asking for you to, I don't know, paint the thing and remove the doodad and whatever, and I gave you till 8 o'clock tonight, and you gave, well, I have to talk to my clients and, you know, they're checking with their contractor or their whatever. I don't know. Maybe we're back to we want to pay out the water heater thing. And they go, yeah, well, I can't get you an answer by this time because we don't have a number and Irving Oil is closed. So you can wait, you cannot wait, you can extend your amendment or we'll deal with it. We recognize you've asked the question, okay? So if the time goes by, sorry, 1 second, I have to just shush my notifications. I guess they're gonna keep binging. So if you receive an amendment and the time goes by, what you would do then, if you're going to, let's say you're going to accept it exactly as is, what should happen is that you reject it and a clean one goes back. We should not be scratching and initialing. Does anybody know why we shouldn't be scratching and initialing?
It's a legal document. You shouldn't be like scribbling all over it. You can make a new document, right?
So that's part of it. Yes, there's a second part of it. And that is that when you start initialing, you need the sister initials back. So if my client's initial, Bill, I need your clients to initial. But there are no timelines associated with initialing. So if I've initialed, my clients have initialed it and I've sent it over to you, my clients think we have a done thing because we've talked about it, we've written it, we've initialed it. But until you initial it, we do not have a done thing. And if you change your mind, there's not a goddamn thing I can do about it.
So would that change if
now
you
I
had
have-
DocuSign? Like in DocuSign, if you initial and you put the date beside it, would it not timestamp it?
No, that's the time you physically signed it, but there's no deadline to get the response back.
Oh, okay.
So let's use the counteroffer, which is the number one thing that makes me freaking crazy. And I'm going to just explain this for a second because it is dangerous. and I can't explain this strongly enough. I talk about it regularly, and I don't know if it goes over people's heads or they just hear me go Snoopy. So if Bill, you wrote me an offer, and I'm the seller, you're the buyer. You wrote the offer. We go, yep, blah blah blah. We're going to send you a counter offer. I send you a counter offer, and you go, your buyers go, blah blah blah. I think we need to. We're going to add the bar stools. Remember, we joked about the bar stools on Monday. We'll do this, but we need those 4 bar stools, life or death. We need the bar stools. So I say, okay, yeah, okay, go ahead. Add them to the counter offer. First of all, you're going to come poke me in the eye with a stick, but you say add them to I'm telling you, Bill, this happens every day. Pardon my language, it makes me crazy. So you add it to the counter offer. Your buyers initial it. You send me back the counter offer. Your buyers think they have an accepted agreement of purchase and sale with bar stools, correct? That's what they think. Because I said, yep, send it over. We'll get my clients to sign it. In the meantime, I get another offer. I don't have to honor you. I can take the new offer and tell you to go jump in the lake. Because we do not have an accepted agreement of purchase and sale. Because all parties have not signed. And there's no timeline to sign it. You could send me that, and if I haven't signed it in 48 hours, I could kick you to the curb then. Agents have absolutely no clue how dangerous this is. You send something over as a listing agent with it initialed in scratch, waiting for the buyers to sign it, same deal. Those buyers can change their mind and walk or not honor the thing that you did, because there is no requirement to initial by a particular time. If there is anything that is not acceptable, you rewrite a counter, or you write a clean APS, or you reject the amendment and write a new one back.
So why don't
Because-
all brokerages tell their people this? Because I mean, I find like it's a pretty easy explanation.
Stacy.
And the arguments that I have had with other realtors who are like, oh no, it's fine. And I'm like, no, my compliance won't take this. We need to it's ridiculous.
So I'm going to give you a suggestion. So first of all, I would love to say that I could teach all of the other chickens to follow the rules, but that's not going to happen. I've done everything I can. I've been on every committee. I've been the president. I'm on the board. I've done all the things. I've done all the things I can do for other people. I wouldn't use the compliance division as the excuse or the justification, because the other person is viewing some assistant in an office pushing paper as the compliance division. I will tell you also that there are many, many brokerages who do not have managing associate brokers reviewing files, but they have staff, which you're not allowed to do. Anyway, that's another conversation. But what you need to say is, I'm sorry, this is a violation of the NSREC rules, and my broker is not going to be okay with this. This does not protect my client. It will take just as long. It will take us just as long to go back and forth with 10 sets of initials as to write a new damn form. We've probably spent longer arguing about it right now than it would take. So the other thing you can also do, depending on the position you're in, if they have initialed it and they're asking you to initial it, you need to call a broker, and basically you want sort of oversight to do it so that you can put in, if it's necessary, depending on the rare circumstance where, you know, the whole thing's going to blow up and your client's going to lose it. If it's one thing, one little initial, you can reach out to the broker on duty. They'll ask you the circumstances. Then you can put in command, you know, I spoke to so-and-so, and in the circumstance, they authorized the whatever. But, so let's say you're, trying to think of how I want to position this. Depending on the side you're on, would depend on how you could explain it. So if you, for example, were the listing agent and they're fiddling around with your counteroffer, and you say, no, I need a new offer, or I will issue you a new counter. Which would you like? And they go, no, 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 let's just initial it. And you can say, well, let's just look at it this way. If you send me this with initials and my people don't sign it right away and another offer comes in, we don't have a deal. I'm pretty sure your buyers aren't going to like that. You can write me a new offer that's clean, that reflects what we've talked about, which will take the same amount of time as initialing and scratching out what we've already got. Or depending on the circumstance, let's say these people are nervous because they think if they write a new offer that someone else can sneak in, and they think someone can't sneak in if they initial. But that's not true, because it's not signed by you, so it's technically no good. So if you, let's say you had someone who was nervous, if you say, look, we're not trying to play games, we're just trying to follow the rules. In order to give comfort to your buyer, my sellers will reissue a counteroffer versus you writing a new offer. Do you understand the difference in the power of that statement? Stacy does. Don't know if anybody else does. Jane,
Can you
Suzette?
repeat it?
So let's say Stacy is my buyer's agent. I'm the listing agent, and she's scratching all over my counteroffer. And I'm saying, no, no, no. You can write me a new offer, or I can send you a new counteroffer. She might say, well, I just want to initial this because I don't want to allow another deal in. Well, number one, you need to tell them that that is not covered by initialing. That can still happen. So if, say it's a really hot property, not that there's a zillion of those right now, but let's say there was. And they say, yeah, but my clients are worried about leaving it open again, that someone else can come in. And you can say, fair enough. We will issue you a clean counteroffer, because a counteroffer is irrevocable. A seller cannot change their mind if the buyer signs it. So you can create comfort. Again, you're creating credibility. You're creating that you're acting fairly and honestly. We're not trying to play games and have you write a new offer so that we can start another fight. We are very content with the negotiation as is, but we need to make sure it's done correctly. So we will issue a new counter, and that way your buyers know that nobody else can jump in front of them, but we will have properly done documents. If you're a buyer's agent and the listing agent is the one now scratching all over the counteroffer, you're not covered. So you might say to them, again, instead of my writing a new offer, can you please just issue me a new counter? Blah, blah, blah. They might go, I don't understand the difference. And you can say, this is why. Because if you send me a new counter, then it's irrevocable and my clients will feel much more comfortable, which will go a long way in our negotiation. Same thing with amendments. Everybody thinks, I'll just scratch it out. Okay, but it's no good. It is no good. If one person changes their mind, the deal's dead. And you will be in significant trouble because you have not followed the rules. That consumer will have cause to come after you, both from a discipline perspective and potentially legal, if this costs them money or costs them a house. Does that help in terms of an objection handler, Stacy?
Yes, it was perfect. And I'm really sorry, but I have to go because I have the multi-generational training that starts right now. So
That's okay.
thank
All
you.
good.
I don't want
Thank
to
you for
leave,
being
but
here. Well, you'll get the rest of the recording if you'd like.
oh, there we go. Okay. All right. Bye.
Okay, perfect. So I know we've gone a little deep on some of these things, but I do truly believe that I'm going to share with you everything I can to help you with really good negotiation. I need to go a little deeper into some of these pieces because that stuff's not the stuff you get taught like anywhere. It's not in the course, right? So switching gears.
And sorry.
Yeah. Yes.
So I just want to make sure. So if if a buyer writes an amendment, right? A buyer side writes an amendment and that time lapses for whatever, like you were saying, they lost internet signal or whatever. What is the outcome of, would I just in that case, would I just send a new one with an adjusted time? Same thing?
Yeah.
They wouldn't,
Yeah.
they wouldn't just kind of
Yes.
say, yes, we accept it after the time has expired. I would send a new one.
They can, but then you're getting into this initialing thing again. And if you're the
Okay.
one receiving the initials, then you're in the driver's seat. If you're the one
Right.
giving the initials, you are dragging behind the bus. That's the dangerous place. So
So the
again,
cleanest, the best practice is to just reissue. Okay,
because it's really
perfect.
no good, it's no good as it is, right?
Yeah.
And in
Yeah.
most cases, a lot of times there's one tweak or something. That's why it didn't get answered in time. So you need to clean it up anyway. Now I will add one caveat to this, of course, which is that the timeline on amendments relating to any 408 clauses must be addressed and accepted by all parties prior to your 408 deadline, or they are not valid. Clear like mud?
Yes.
Okay. You cannot, so I'll just give you a quick practical example. Let's say my 408 deadline is 10 p.m. tonight, and I write an amendment for an inspection item. Okay. And I leave it open till tomorrow at 5. But my 408 deadline is 10 p.m. tonight. If that amendment isn't back before 9:55 and I can send a 408 on that item by 10, regardless of when I left it open, the deal is dead. The only thing you can amend after or around a 408 clause is non-408 things like lawyer review. I don't know, we're gonna say, could we change the closing date? We have to change the name on the deal. I don't know, do you know what I mean? Those things they don't matter how long, they're different. They can go past the 408 timeline. As long as they're not connected to whether or not your client's gonna give a 408, right? But there is a very strong misunderstanding by a lot of people that they can amend that and drag the 408 with them. Can't. I have many skills, but resurrecting the dead isn't one of them. And the deal is dead if the 408 on all conditions is not issued at the time it is, period, full stop. So you can't amend over that timeline. So that would be the only time, Suzette, where letting it lapse is more difficult, is a different element than just a regular one when you've got lots of time. Okay. Anybody else have any questions on this before I switch gears? Okay, perfect. Again, please jump in. This is why we're here. So, when you're working with a buyer, again, this says, get their pre-approval, review the MLS documents and stuff. Well, that should all be done. That should all be done before you're even out and about. And before you're writing offers, you should have as much as you can. With respect to pre-approvals, I do want to make sure that everybody is very clear that there's a difference between an online pre-approval and an actual pre-approval. Is everybody clear with the difference? I don't have smiley nods from everybody. Suzette, are you comfortable? Do you understand? Are you guys okay? So you'll have clients who say, "Oh, I'm pre-approved for 400,000, 500,000, 800,000, whatever." Oh, great. Who are you working with? Oh, well, I did my online application. The 2-minute BMO RBC. No, you are not pre-approved. You have not submitted any documents. They have not seen your pay stub, your NOA, your job letter. No. You have a hypothetical if everything else in the universe is exactly the way you said it was, and there's not a blip on your credit score, and your car loan is what you said it is, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you're good. That's not a pre-approval. And it certainly gives you an indication of what they could do and they go back to their mortgage partner, or you put them with a mortgage partner. But please, for the sake of both your buyers and your sellers, please ensure that your buyers are truly pre-approved, that basically all we need is a house to go with them, meaning they're fine. Like their stuff's been checked. All we now need is an agreement of purchase and sale and the bank to approve the value of the house. But the people are good. Why does that matter? Well, it matters because if they did this quick online check thing and they think they're approved for 550, so you go running around looking at houses. Well, you've shown them all these houses that are 440, 435, 450, or 550, whatever. And they're in love with this. This is the one they found them when their heart's happy. You submit the deal. Their mortgage person's going, whoa, whoa, whoa. Oh, we got a 475 max here. So-and-so's got $1,000 a month Ford 150 car payment or whatever, blah, blah, blah. No, not happening. Well, first of all, now you have broken their hearts, wasted their time. There's a seller who's very likely incredibly irritated with you. You may also have buyers who have just spent their literal last cent in cash on inspections on a house that they have no chance of buying. Pre-approval is a pre-approval. I'm not saying you have to have the letter, but you have to have some indication that this is an actual pre-approval. And one of the filters is when you're speaking to your buyers is to ask them if they have submitted any supporting documentation to the person. If they have not, they are not pre-approved. They are hypothetically pre-approved. And it's not just about the sellers, but it's also about your buyers, because, I mean, here's the reality. You take someone and show them the very fancy car, and then you say, okay, well, let's negotiate this fancy car. Okay, great. Oh, you're going to get the fancy car. We're just waiting for the finance department to come back and say you can buy it. Oh, my dear, no. This was the Mercedes, whatever. And now we're going to go over to Hyundai. Do you think they're going to like the Hyundai now that they've driven the Mercedes? Probably not. Well, it's the same thing with houses. You are yanking their life out from underneath them because everything that you showed them that was, say, in the low fives, that you were busy telling them was garbage because it needed this and needed that. Now you're going back and saying, well, that's actually what I can sell you. No. Does that make sense? So pre-approval is important. We no longer are required to provide pre-approval letters in deals. We used to have to do that. That used to be a condition of deals. We had to physically submit them. The only time you need to attach a pre-approval letter is when you are doing a sale of buyer's property, which you will do more and more of as the market balances. If you submit an offer with an SOBP and you receive notice that you have 24 hours, 48 hours, whatever it is on your offer to get your you-know-what together and waive financing, or waive the SOBP. Sorry, you're not waiving financing, you're waiving SOBP. First of all, if your clients aren't actually pre-approved and or to carry the two houses, you're pooched, but that's a different conversation. Pardon me. If you do not have that finance letter to go with the SOBP, then it is void. The SOBP is done and you are out. So that is the only time you are required to send a pre-approval letter. And the pre-approval letter must be what's called clean, not subject to the sale of a house or really any other conditions, including appraisal. Because that should have happened in the financing part. If it is not a clean finance letter, you're out. Okay. So that's pre-approvals. But again, all of these things are key to how you negotiate. You have a stronger negotiating position for your buyer if you are confident that they are pre-approved and you have permission to convey that to the other side. And especially when you're able to say, I have spoken to their mortgage partner, or I have received a copy of their pre-approval letter. We are not wasting your client's time. And in many cases, you might be offering on something where these people have had multiple financing deals fall. It's one thing if the house doesn't appraise, that's not the same thing. But these sellers are now shopping, looking, thinking their house is sold, and you have no chance in heck in accomplishing that deal. It's not fair to anybody. It's not fair to the buyer. It's not fair to you. It's a waste of your time. The sellers are upset. Everybody's upset. That other agent is upset, which goes back to what we talked about before, which is how do we build that rapport and how do we build the relationships? When you crash deals because you don't have pre-approved clients, I'm telling you that will hurt you greatly in future negotiation with these agents because they're not going to trust you. Make sense? Okay. So produce a CMA and go through all the different documents. So I'm I am not going to go through the entire minutia of what conditions may need to be completed on a transaction. I don't think that's the point of what we're doing here today. But I will say that in terms of price recommendations that you make for a buyer, you should have some research done and or at least sort of a reverse CMA for your own self if it is not something you have sold 5,000 of in the last X period of time that you just know. And most buyers do feel very comfortable and more confident in putting their offer forward when they can see that the other 4 houses nearby sold recently, you know, in the same price point, that they're not overpaying. Please also be cognizant when you are producing CMAs for both buyers and sellers that you are using sales that are as time-wise as close as possible. In particular, we ran into an issue about a year and a half ago when we started to have the big jump in interest rates, which obviously had the impact it was supposed to have, which was to sort of balance the market. It didn't, our prices didn't drop, but it didn't keep going up. And so you would have, if someone was, let's say the first rate hike was in June, I think it went up 2% or something. It was shocking, the first one when it went up. I do remember that. And so say July, August, September, you still had buyers who were running around with pre-approvals at 2%. But then pretty quickly, all the pre-approvals were now at 4.5, which completely changed the buying power of the agent, which changed, or of the buyer, which changed the pricing and the negotiation. So you want to look at listings that you're comparing to that ideally are not just close in time based on what's happening in the market, but also what's happening with respect to things like interest rates. If I was to compare what a buyer could pay for something at 5% versus 1.75, which is where we were during COVID, it's a completely different thing. So comparing a sale price of that to something today at 4.75 is not a fair comparable. Do you see where I'm going with that? So being able to demonstrate that to buyers and to sellers. For sellers, it's about making sure they're clear on the expectations on what they're going to get on price. They're not going to get the same price for their house when the cost of borrowing and ownership is double. And making sure that sellers understand how that works, and making sure that buyers are also confident that they're not, overpaying, et cetera, that they're paying value. Everybody wants a deal, but ultimately what they really want is to pay the correct value, whatever that is. They're fine if it's a deal, as I say, but nobody wants to overpay. Not to say that they won't, that's a choice, et cetera, but to have that comfort. But again, when you're doing those analyses for your clients, please make sure that you are taking those other factors in. So looking at something, a year and a half ago, or let's say we had just had a huge change in rates 2 months ago, I would need to, when explaining or showing those other listings that I may have pulled from that earlier time frame, I need to make sure I explain that to the clients that this price, if it was at today's interest rate, would probably be X versus what you're seeing. And that will make a big difference in how you're preparing and what expectations you're setting for both parties. If you know these numbers and you're negotiating, let's say the seller's agent doesn't know these numbers. And they're saying, well, my client expects to get Y because the neighbor down the road did. And you go, okay, yeah, but that neighbor down the road, that was 10 months ago when interest rates were 2.5% or whatever, right? And so, yeah, that's not relevant. We need to look at these ones that are now. Fair? Bill, did you have your hand up? Oh, okay. You must have been just talking. Okay. So those are key points in terms of how we're going to negotiate. So moving forward. What is it telling me now? 1 moment. Writing the offers. Again, I'm not going to go into the specific minutia of every element that you need to include in an offer. I'm pretty comfortable you guys know that. However, I will say, please never hesitate if you need or want a broker to review an offer before it goes. We are happy to do that, Please do not give us 30 minutes notice. That's not going to work. But if you know you're going to be writing something, we are more than happy to look at it in draft and make sure that you're on track. In particular, also, if you're writing an offer on something you have either not written an offer on before or not in a very long time, i.e., you haven't written on a condo before. Okay, we should look at that. You've never written on a multi-unit. You've never listed a multi-unit. You've never, these are the ones we definitely want to help you see. And the same thing goes with your amendments. We are happy to discuss them. We are happy to guide you with clauses. I have warned all of you at various times that I will teach you how to fish. I will not do it for you. So we will have a conversation. You will draft your clause. You will send it over to the broker team, and then they will work with you to improve it or give you a gold star. Because if you do it yourself together with us, you will learn it. And that will give you more power when you're speaking to your clients to be able to tell them how you intend to structure X or Y because you've done it. So it's in here. So again, I'm not going to go through the preparing the offer part because that's more of a mechanical class and we don't need to do that today. That's okay. What do we got now? I did review all these, but talking through the offer. So when you're doing, and we chatted a little bit about this on Monday about like DocuSign and what clients are seeing. If you're, depending on how you're physically reviewing your drafted offer with your client, most of mine are done by Zoom. Probably 95% of them are done by Zoom, where I literally share my screen and pull it up and make sure we're all good. And do we have this? And is this right? And do we understand this? And yada, yada, yada. Maybe you're sitting in person in an office. If neither of those are possible, then my recommendation is that at very minimum, you send it in a PDF flat. I recommend that you highlight the key points, literally highlight them in a program. You can do it in web forms. You can do it in PDF Expert, Adobe, whatever. There's a million ways to do it. And that you have a phone conversation if possible. If not possible, then you want to basically write a very long email that explains all of the things and asking them to confirm that everything there and that the offer does completely fill their instructions and they are happy to sign it. You need to be able to prove at all times that you have gone through your documents. And again, from a position of negotiation and dealing with offers, if your consumers, buyers or sellers, they're reviewing the offer they've received, if they don't actually really understand the due diligence times, what happens with the deposit, what happens if they don't give the 408, they are not going to understand that by just looking at this form. So it is very important. This is the big deal contract. This is the big one. Okay. So we need to make sure that we have reviewed that in detail. And again, you might receive an instruction from either your seller or your buyer, either in an offer or a counter that you are unsure of how to structure. Again, please, please, please reach out to the broker team. We really, really love being able to be in a proactive position for you. Lots of different reasons for that. One being that you are also never going to disappoint your clients by then having to go back and say, well, actually, I didn't write this right, and now we have a problem. Or I thought we were getting X, but we're actually getting Y. You will build more credibility if the offer you send in does not require you to go back and get 500 amendments and initials and changes to fix stuff that was missed, or heaven forbid, rewrite significant clauses and have to drag lawyers in to undo what wasn't fully done. This is the big deal document. So please, please take the time. If you're showing properties and you think there's a possibility you're going to write on it, draft it early. We'll look at it. Then basically all you're doing is plugging in dates and price, right? If you're not writing offers regularly, pick any listing on MLS. Write a dummy offer, send it in to us, send it in to your mentor, whoever. Well, if the mentor's not a managing associate broker, it would come to us and we'll take a look at it. We'll help you practice. No problem. You haven't listed something in a long time, or you haven't listed a particular kind of thing, pick something, do the documents up, pick any listing, Do your own SDBA, draft SDBA as a test. Do the input form. Figure out the measurements. Play with it. The more you do that, the smarter your pants are when you're talking to your clients. Okay? So again, we are here to guide you through that. Okay, what else have I got here? Does anybody need a break? We're okay for now? Okay, stop me if you do at any point. Presenting the offer. So again, this comes to the communication stuff we've already talked about. Obviously, getting everything signed, reviewing them, following the instructions of your client. Notify the listing agent. I'm going to tell you again, I mentioned I had a pet peeve. I think I have another one. This is another one, which is that I'm a listing agent and I don't even know an offer's coming. And I get it at X time at night and it's only open for some ridiculous time. And I didn't even know it was coming. That's just not good communication. The other thing to be very careful of is if you do not tell agents that your offer is coming and it goes to their spam, you have a problem. They need to confirm receipt. This is harder than it sounds, unfortunately, and it may require you to send a text message, call, send a carrier pigeon, I don't know, get a clown, whatever you need to do. Let these people know something's coming and to please confirm receipt. If you do not get an answer within a particular time, you need to call again. If at a certain point you are now not getting anywhere and nobody is listening to you, what are you doing? What are you going to do? Anybody? If the other side is ignoring you, what are we doing?
I would pick up the phone and call them.
No, you've called them. They're not answering you. You've left voicemails. They're not answering you. You have no idea if they have your offer. What are you doing now?
I think I'd talk to a broker and find out exactly what to do, but you can reach out to the other broker and say the other agent's not doing what they're supposed to be doing, right?
And that has happened. Okay. So again, we are here to support you in your business. If someone is ghosting you or you're not getting answers or you're trying to book a showing and they're like, be reasonable, right? But 24, like you're not getting any answers, then you need to call us. We will go to the other broker and have them check on it. I know, again, I don't remember when, because we've discussed, I don't know what day it is. But I can remember years ago writing an offer for buyers. We sent it over to this other agent. I've worked with this agent a million times. This agent is, I'm going to say, more senior. And this person was not responding, was not answering, was not in any way. It was at the point where I called their broker because I was actually concerned about this person. It was so out of character for this person to not acknowledge. Like I literally thought this person could have had a heart attack or was somewhere, like something was not okay. It was so out of character. So again, we always want to give the benefit of the doubt. Sometimes they are just being unpleasant, but I can assure you that unfortunately for you, sometimes that call around will expedite things for you. And we have to make sure that your client is looked after. Okay. So please make sure that you somehow get confirmation of receipt. What have I got now? Where's my checklist? Hello. Oh, it's giving me the same document again. My apologies. No, it's still doing it. It's not changing. Why is it not changing? That's not helpful to me. Let me try the slideshow thing for a second and see. Oh, they are. Let me see if this will make a difference. Oh, wow, that's really big, but okay. Okay, it is working now. I don't know why it was not liking us. So receive, review, and respond to the offer, whether this means you're receiving it as a buyer and you're getting a counter offer, or you're the seller and you're doing it. Again, it's moving through it. Getting to a decision. And we've talked about, interestingly, I have this weird way of going around in the slides and still landing in the same place. But it is, we've talked about this. We've talked about what happens if we accept, what happens if we reject, et cetera, and how to move forward. And remembering at all times that our communication is a big part of that. What is happening? Now, for the love of Pete. Just a minute. This PowerPoint is annoying me. Not gonna lie. Okay, so path of negotiation. Again, I'm not going to get into this with you guys. This is the basics of how we move through our transactions. I really don't think that that's adding a lot of value to you. We've talked exactly about all of this and how everybody is interconnected. That is a pretty fun little graphic, though, I will say. And the common negotiation points are very often price, obviously, is one. But there's other elements. You know, what do they want? What's the timeline? What are the conditions, etc.? Those are all big factors. And I know some of you may have written offers on a property in a competition, and the sale price came out and it was less than yours. And you think, well, why didn't my offer get accepted? Again, in preparing your buyers, it's important that they understand that there are elements to another offer that could have been more appealing. Maybe that person waived inspections. Maybe that person had cash. Maybe their closing date was better. I don't know, right? One little warning I will give you, though, as a listing agent, you're going to see a lot of agents, less now, but it does happen, where they don't tick financing. If you are a seller's agent, I am imploring you to pick up the phone and call that agent and ask them if it is cash or are they pre-approved, and that's why they're not putting financing in. You will be surprised at how many of them are being financed and they are not cash deals. But the agent is doing a workaround to try to make their deal win because the client is pre-approved, with the mindset that they will get out on some other condition, which is not what you're supposed to do. Can we also be very clear about that? So what happens, I get this call pretty regularly. We accepted a deal. It had no financing, so it was cash. No, it just didn't have a financing clause. It's not the same thing. Now I'm getting a call from an appraiser who wants in. Sellers are pissed. Agents pissed. What are you going to do? It is what it is. You're going to let them in because they're going to get out on lawyer review, even though it's not how they should get out. So you now have expectations set with a seller that are now being deflated. Your seller may say, well, I would have taken that other offer that we knew was cash because I didn't think this one had financing. Well, the only reason they think it had no financing and it was cash is because you led them to believe that. So you need to pick up the phone if you receive an offer that has no financing and confirm exactly what's happening. It doesn't mean you don't accept it, but maybe you go back and say, okay, well, this is what they've told me. You document with your clients that you've told them that this is what it is. It is a pre-approval, and we can't expect that an appraiser is going to come in. Or maybe you counter back and it's not subject to financing, but it's subject to appraisal. Because it's just about expectations. Because if your client accepts that offer and they think that there's no financing, and now you get the call from the appraiser to let them in, I am telling you, your sellers are not happy. Does everyone see the difference? Okay, so back to my little slides. So again, terms, have clarity in the terms. If you receive any offer or write any offer where it is not 100% clear as to what they mean, if you have any interpretation, then it needs to be countered. It needs to be tidied up. The death and one of the most dangerous things in real estate is ambiguity. So they're suggesting a 3Ps approach, 3Ps approach, which is preparation in building confidence. That's what we've talked about. What are the expectations? What are the timelines? What is the market value? What's happening? What are we expecting either as a buyer or a seller? And bring the offer forward, and then to position it by negotiating and having conversations to get everybody to the finish line together. Obey the laws, know the documents, yada, yada, yada. Okay, we know this jazz. purposeful questions. This is, again, we've talked about this, to be perfectly honest, in a million different ways, which is just making sure that as you're going through, that you're not a yes man, basically. Okay, that you are asking the correct questions in order to prepare your client, buyer, or seller, whether that means you're asking questions of the buyer's agent or you're asking questions of the seller's agent, so that you are prepared. So they're talking about open-ended and closed-ended questions here. I'm not sure if anyone has ever done any training on that at all whatsoever, but essentially the conversation is trying not to position yourself in a question where someone can simply say yes or no, and then you have nowhere to come around. Think about it when you walk into a store and they go, "Are you looking for anything in particular?" And you go, "No, just looking." It's really hard for that salesperson to come back without looking weird to try and re-engage you in conversation. Fair? Versus if they came to you and said something like, I'm trying to think, this depends on the product, but basically something where, it may be, I know we have such and such over here, whatever. Again, I'm better at it when I'm doing actual listing appointments. My brain is turning off. But again, it's the conversation of not trying to back yourself into a corner. Okay. So for example, are there, sometimes they are going to be closed-ended questions when you're talking to the other side, but it depends on where you are. Is there a particular date that is more suitable for your clients for closing? They're going to say yes or no. That one's kind of a yes or no. There's kind of not a lot around to it. Are there any items in the home, that they were pretending to leave, etc.? Are there things I should know, etc.? I'm not as concerned about your closed-ended questions in these types of scenarios because I still think it's based more on communication. The closed-ended questions are a lot of the time has to do with looking for the close in the sense of you're getting the listing or getting the buyer. So I'm going to share my screen again. Oh God, now we've completely lost everything. Here we go. What would happen if, why is this important to you? So these are questions when you're talking to your buyer or seller. So let's say you've received an offer and it's, you're weighing, say, different factors, the price versus the closing date. Well, which one is more important to you? Like, can we talk about this? How are we, what are the pros and cons of each scenario? That's sort of what they're talking about here, is versus drawing a line, pardon me, in the sand, that there's only one black and white option, versus having more conversations with your clients. This is talking about role play and basically practicing how to practice, negotiation. How do I present an offer? How do I ask you for $10,000 for something? These are great role play things to do with other people in the office. We've talked about this already. Best practices when presenting: staying calm, focusing on your client's needs, paying attention to nonverbal cues. We talked a little bit about this on Monday about there are certain conversations that are better to have with clients, whether that's face-to-face or voice-to-voice, and that they shouldn't be done by text or email. A knowing and acknowledging. So there's an expression in negotiation. So one of the things here, of course, is that know that positioning is a process and know when to walk away, because we've talked about that. But there is something called feel, felt, found. Has anybody ever heard that as a communication strategy? So when you're talking to someone who's particularly on the, I don't want to say the opposing side, because we have a willing buyer, willing seller, but who's in a different negotiating position than you, and the person is saying, well, blah, 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 this, or the buyer or seller is getting very absolute with you. A way to approach those communication strategies to help your negotiation are often to say things, I hear what you're saying. I am listening to what you're saying. I want to make sure that I clearly understand exactly what you're saying to me. They say, whatever you say. Okay, so I have an example. I have found in this circumstance, this scenario, this scenario, this scenario, right? How do you feel about any of those? Again, that's not a yes or no question. You can't say yes or no to that. You're asking them to comment. That's how you're going to get to the root of what is the anxiety in the offer, either to as the buyer or the seller. They, the closing date is being, absolute from the seller, and your buyer's like, oh my God, I can't do that, whatever. And you're like, okay, like, let's talk about this. Like, what's happening here? Like, how are you feeling? Why is this upsetting you? Whatever. Like, you're asking these questions to get to the problem. You might find out that they actually have to, maybe they didn't tell you that they need to sublet and they can't get out of their lease and they forgot to tell you or something, and now they're freaking out. Okay, I have found in this situation, going back to the seller and getting your permission to tell them X or Y, and this is a date that's important to us. Do you see how that like circle can happen? I had a circumstance this end of summer, beginning of school year. We had clients who were in the process of purchasing a home, and the sellers were quite adamant on a particular date. And I have permission to say this. You don't know who this person is anyway, but the person is more than fine with me telling anybody what it was. I was given permission, because I needed permission, to let the sellers know that my client was a teacher, and that basically that they wanted them to close like on the third day of school, which is not an option. They cannot get those days off, period. They're not allowed to get those days off at all for anything, blah, 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 whatever. Like, the worst week of her person's entire year was the first week of school. So could we go before or after, for example? But I had to get permission to say that. In having that conversation, we created relationship with the other agent, and they understood, and it allowed the people to be human and them to understand. Well, it turns out that that person's seller was also a teacher, and this would actually work better, and blah, blah, blah. So again, I need permission to share that because that's confidential information. But can you see how asking more questions about why things are important can accomplish that? So where did you guys go? Hang on. I've lost everybody. Just a minute. That's because I'm not sharing my screen. That would be the first step. I'll be fine. Is it Monday? Okay, go back to our little slideshow thing, because that was actually working better. So we've talked about that. We've talked about that. We've talked about that. This is the same thing. Honestly, I think we've covered all of this, which is the not being attached to the outcome, what's right for the person, making sure we're focused on the needs of all of the parties involved. Is that the end? What is happening? Why is it? Oh, I'm so sorry that I'm getting these tech issues. Oh, that is actually the last slide. Huh, normally it's not. Okay, so essentially, we've talked about some practical things with respect to our rules and things like that in terms of practices, etc. But really, the concept here is about the bigger picture, making sure that we are communicating both with our clients, the other side, etc., that we're being fair and that we're following the rules, but also understanding. Honestly, one of the big things for me is making sure that everybody understands that the negotiation is from the minute you book that showing to the day you hand over the keys. You, on either side, okay? Whether you're the seller's agent and you book the showing for your seller, and now you're arranging for the other agent to pick up the keys. You are working with all of these consumers and all of these agents from that moment until the end. And your negotiation, if you think about how you go through all of those different stages, if those weren't done well, and now we have a problem on pre-close, it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder, especially if you don't have that good communication with the other agent. If the expectations for your client aren't right, if the amendment asking for the thing to be fixed wasn't done properly, so now the outcomes are not as expected. One of the things that's important when we're talking about how we're preparing our documents and how we're negotiating and how we're setting the standards is, no matter what the thing is, let's say I'm a buyer's agent and the sellers are supposed to replace the oil tank. I'm just going to go like one of those simple basic ones we deal with every day. And your clause said, seller to replace the oil tank at their expense before closing. Well, guess what? Your client can put an old oil tank in. Doesn't say it has to be new. You just said you're replacing it. It doesn't have to be done by a professional. Bob, I could go do it. Oh, maybe we spilled a little oil. It's fine. Maybe there aren't Protect coated lines. Maybe the vent and fill pipe aren't right. Maybe the lines are in the basement and they don't have the steppy thingy to prevent you from kicking it. Super technical. You know, the thing. It stops you from tripping over the oil line. But if you wrote the clause the way I just said it, and you get to closing and you go and look for that oil tank, and your buyers, you go, wait a minute, this is 5 years old, not 10 years old. Guess who's buying an oil tank? You are. You are buying an oil tank. Congratulations. Because you didn't write a great clause. So if you wrote the clause a particular way that said, for example, the seller's expense is to have a double-walled X 903 liter steel tank installed by a qualified heating and oil specialist with all receipts and warranties to be provided, blah, 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 by X date, failing which, blah, blah, blah. Can you see the difference in what I've just done? Now you get to pre-close or the day before, and there is no replaced oil tank. Or they bought one off Kijiji and tried to pull a fast one because I said new. And they tried to pull a fast one and bought a used one and they've swapped it out. When you did that amendment, you told your clients, if they don't do it right, this is what will happen. We will get X. We will do Y. When it happens on closing that the other side didn't do the thing, whatever the thing is, the clients are way less upset because they go, huh, Jane had us covered for this. Not her fault the sellers were snakes. No worries. We've got this fully covered. We're good to close. Oil tank guy's coming tomorrow. And the seller's paying for it. Do you see the difference? I've set the expectations. That's how you have repeat and referral business. That's how you stay out of real estate jail. That's how you don't buy oil tanks. I would like you to never, any of you, buy an appliance or a bar stool or an oil tank because it wasn't covered. Flip side, we talked about this, we joked about this in one of the things I was talking about the other day about, you know, you're the listing agent and you forgot to exclude grandma's light fixture in the dining room. Let me tell you, you think bar stools are a thing, grandma's light fixture is a whole other thing. Sellers are going to die on a hill over this. They're not going to close. You can't replace it because it's not replaceable with the same type of thing. So taking the time, making sure our clients check things, make sure we ask questions. There's a very strong tendency now to go very fast instead of taking a moment and doing it right. When we're writing offers, I mean, I'm not suggesting you hang around for 5 days waiting to write an offer when you might lose the property, but not being ready, not taking the extra time to check your amendments, not checking your listings before they go live, you only hurt the negotiation all the way through because now you got to undo it. What I hope that you take from today and the session that I did on Monday is about communication. It's about we can have strong and successful businesses and still be true to essentially the formalities or the principles of the Y4C2Ts, and that we don't have to not be the good people that you are to have a great business. And in fact, the more you are yourselves and the more you stay true to your personal values, the better your business will be. And that the shortcuts aren't necessary. They're just not necessary. And that we will be here to back you up and to help teach you to get through these things. Does anybody have any questions since I'm apparently early today?
I think a
Bill,
lot of what you're saying too, Ann, is that as a newer agent, or if you're unsure, to definitely check with a broker. And you know, I don't think I'd be wasting your time if I
Never.
reached out. Do you know what I mean? Or any other broker,
Never,
not
never.
just you. Like, you know,
Yeah.
if you're
Yeah,
not
absolutely.
on call, don't call in. But yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll put it this way, Bill. I'm always technically on call because if the broker team need to bring it up the flagpole, I
Yeah.
will answer my phone if my brokers
Right.
call me when I'm on duty, but I'm not on duty. I do want you to know that,
Yeah.
that the support doesn't stop. Even if I'm not primarily on the phone, there are going to be scenarios. You will be told, this is the sentence you will hear, Bill. The broker on duty will say, "Hmm, that's an Ann question. One moment, please." I'll come back to you. And that's when it's weird. Like they know 99% of the stuff, but those are the, okay, yeah, just yeah. So I'm so glad that you take that to heart, Bill, because it is true. You're never wasting our time. We don't you don't sign up for this gig because you're looking for a 9 to 5.
Right.
Looking for a 9 to
Yeah.
5 thing, or you're not prepared to take, interesting calls and questions. So please. And again, yes, excellent. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Where did you get your sweater?
Oh, I